The icy winds of the Baltic Sea whip through the sails of Swedish warships as cannon fire thunders in the distance. The year is 1611, and Denmark's forces press hard against Sweden's defenses. Along the coastline, muskets crack and swords clash as soldiers fight to defend their homeland. Sweden, long overshadowed by its neighbors, faces a fight for control of its future. This is the beginning of a transformation. From the Kalmar War of 1611 to 1613, where Sweden battles Denmark for control of the Baltic, to the Treaty of Stolbovo in 1617, Sweden rises against the odds. These conflicts aren't just local disputes, they are steps toward greatness. By 1621, Swedish forces storm the gates of Riga, consolidating their dominance in the Baltic. Each battle shapes a kingdom that is preparing to take its place on Europe's grand stage. As the 30 Years' War erupts in 1618, plunging much of Europe into chaos, Sweden watches and waits. Led by the young and ambitious Gustavus Adolphus, the kingdom transforms itself into a military and economic powerhouse. But how did Sweden, a small northern kingdom, achieve this? How did Gustavus Adolphus harness Sweden's resources to take on Europe's greatest powers? This is the story of Sweden's rise to dominance, a journey forged in war, diplomacy, and ambition. (1611) The Baltic Sea. Danish warships cut through the waters. On Sweden's rugged shores, the winter stillness is broken as soldiers prepare for battle. Denmark-Norway, buoyed by its naval supremacy, aims to solidify its control over the Baltic, while Sweden, chafing under Danish tolls and dominance, readies itself for a fight that will shape its future as a sovereign power. This is the beginning of the Kalmar War. For decades, the kingdoms of Denmark, Norway, and Sweden have been locked in an uneasy rivalry. Denmark, ruled by King Christian IV, commands the Øresund Strait, the narrow passage that links the Baltic to the North Sea. Every ship passing through is taxed, swelling Denmark's coffers and cementing its position as the dominant power in Northern Europe. Sweden, under the rule of the ailing King Charles IX, bears the brunt of these tolls. The kingdom's economic growth is stifled, its ambitions for maritime expansion curtailed by Danish control. For Sweden, the stakes are clear. Breaking free of Denmark's grip is not just about trade, but about survival as a rising power. By the spring of 1611, Denmark begins to push to secure its dominance as it ignites a war that will reshape the balance of power in the Baltic region. April 1611, King Christian IV moves decisively. Danish forces target Kalmar, a fortress of strategic importance on Sweden's southeastern coast. The attack is swift and merciless. Kalmar falls in a matter of weeks, its loss a blow to Sweden's defenses and morale. Emboldened by this victory, Danish forces press on, capturing Ellsborg on the western coast and tighten their grip on Sweden's access to trade routes. Tragedy strikes Sweden later that year. King Charles IX succumbs to illness in October 1611, leaving the throne to his 17-year-old son, Gustavus Adolphus. The young king inherits a fractured kingdom, an outmatched army, and an empty treasury. Yet Gustavus, resolute and shrewd beyond his years, quickly reorganizes Sweden's military. Christian IV personally leads his campaigns, his forces ravaging Swedish villages and spreading terror. But Gustavus counters with bold raids on Danish supply lines, exploiting the harsh terrain to disrupt their advance. Despite mounting losses, Swedish troops rally under their young king's leadership, turning the war into a grueling stalemate. By late 1612, both kingdoms are drained by the prolonged conflict. In a bold counteroffensive near Kalmar, Gustavus Adolphus leads his troops in a surprise assault on Danish positions. His strategy of speed and precision overwhelms Christians' forces, who falter under the relentless attacks. Meanwhile, Swedish skirmishes near Elfsborg disrupt Danish supply lines, forcing Christian to overstretch his forces. Denmark's initial confidence erodes as logistical challenges and growing domestic resistance take their toll. The war, once envisioned as a swift Danish victory, devolves into a costly impasse. Battered and exhausted, both sides meet in January 1613 in the Swedish town of Knäret to negotiate peace. The resulting treaty ends the Kalmar War. Sweden regains Elfsborg and other territories, but only after paying a hefty ransom of 1 million riksdaler, a financial strain that will burden its economy for years. Yet Sweden achieves a critical milestone: the right to trade freely through the North Sea, bypassing Danish tolls. This concession, though modest, marks the beginning of Sweden's rise as a maritime power. Denmark retains control of the Øresund Strait and its lucrative tolls, but the strain of the war exposes vulnerabilities in its dominance. Gustavus Adolphus, undeterred by the war's hardships, emerges as the leader who embarks on a mission to transform Sweden into a great power. The Treaty of Stolbovo, signed on the frozen shores of Lake Ladoga in February 1617, this landmark agreement concludes the Ingrian War, a conflict as brutal as it is transformative. Sweden looks to secure control over key territories that cement its influence in the eastern Baltic. Meanwhile, Russia, cut off from the sea, faces the harsh consequences of internal instability and foreign intervention. This treaty is more than the end of a war. It redefines the balance of power in the Baltic region. For Sweden, it is another step toward greatness, building on the lessons of the Kalmar War and the ambitions of Gustavus Adolphus. For Russia, it is a bitter reckoning, forcing a revaluation of its strategies and aspirations. The Ingrian War unfolds against the backdrop of Russia's time of troubles from 1598-1613, a period of dynastic collapse and societal upheaval following the death of Tsar Fyodor I. With the Rurik dynasty extinguished, Russia descends into chaos, its lands plagued by famine, civil war, and foreign incursions. Pretenders to the throne, the so-called false Dmitris, divide the nation, leaving it vulnerable to opportunistic neighbors. Sweden, fresh from its struggles in the Kalmar War, sees an opening in Russia's turmoil. Under King Charles IX and later Gustavus Adolphus, Sweden embarks on a campaign to expand its influence in the Baltic, secure trade routes, and check Polish power. The Gulf of Finland becomes the focal point of this ambition, as Sweden seeks to dominate the region. Meanwhile, Russia struggles to unify. The ascension of Michael Romanov in 1613 brings a semblance of stability, but the scars of foreign intervention remain fresh. With Poland occupying parts of Western Russia and Sweden advancing from the north, the new Tsar faces an uphill battle to restore sovereignty and resist external pressures. Sweden's intervention begins in 1610, spurred by Poland's victory at the Battle of Klushino. Alarmed by Polish influence in Russia, Sweden launches its own campaign to secure strategic footholds in Ingria and Karelia. General Jacob de la Gardie leads Swedish forces into Novgorod in 1611, gaining a crucial stronghold and seeking to install Prince Carl Philip, son of Charles IX, as a puppet Tsar. Initially, Novgorod's boyars cooperate with Sweden, viewing its presence as a counterbalance to Polish domination. But Swedish ambitions clash with Russian nationalism, and local resistance soon erodes the plan. As Michael Romanov consolidates power in Moscow, the tide begins to turn against foreign occupiers. Swedish forces capture key towns, but struggle to hold them in the face of local uprisings, harsh winters, and stretched resources. 1613 to 1617, the war becomes a grinding stalemate. Swedish troops fortify their positions, while Russian forces, though poorly coordinated, launch sporadic counterattacks. Both sides endure significant losses as the conflict drains their treasuries and manpower. Gustavus Adolphus, now king, recognizes the limitations of prolonged warfare and pivots toward diplomacy to achieve Sweden's goals. February 1617. Sweden and Russia come to the negotiating table near Lake Ladoga. The resulting Treaty of Stolbovo is a resounding victory for Sweden, as it secures control over Ingria and Karelia, territories critical for dominating the eastern Baltic and establishing a buffer against future Russian aggression. Russia retains Novgorod, but relinquishes its claims to Livonia and Estonia, cementing Sweden's supremacy in the region. More devastatingly, the treaty permanently cuts Russia off from the Baltic Sea, a blow that stifles its maritime ambitions and leaves its economic future dependent on land-based trade routes. For Gustavus Adolphus, the treaty is a success, solidifying Sweden's control over the Baltic's eastern shores. For Tsar Michael Romanov, it is a necessary concession, providing Russia with a respite from foreign invasions and a chance to rebuild internally. In the wake of the treaty, Sweden's position as the dominant Baltic power is unshakable. The annexation of Ingria and Karelia bolsters its defenses and provides strategic control over key trade routes. The military innovations honed during the Ingrian War, combined with the lessons of diplomatic negotiation, prepare Sweden for its imminent role in the 30 Years' War that is to come. For Russia, the loss of Baltic access underscores the dangers of internal fragmentation. Cut off from the sea, the Romanov dynasty redirects its ambitions eastward, initiating Siberian expansion and the development of overland trade networks. The local populations of Ingria and Karelia endure the brunt of these changes. Under Swedish rule, Lutheran practices are imposed, creating friction with Orthodox Christians. Resistance flares sporadically, but Swedish military reforms ensure firm control over these territories, cementing their place within the expanding Swedish Empire. As the spring of 1621 settles, the battered gates of Riga swing open under Swedish banners. For Gustavus Adolphus, this triumph is not merely a military conquest, it is a declaration of Sweden's arrival as a power capable of reshaping the Baltic world. With the fall of Riga, a city vital to trade and commerce, Sweden solidifies its hold on the region and signals to Europe that it is no longer a kingdom to be overlooked. From the aftermath of the Treaty of Stolbovo in 1617 to the Siege of Riga in 1621, Gustavus Adolphus transforms his kingdom into a formidable force, setting the stage for its emergence as a great European power. While much of Europe descends into chaos with the outbreak of the 30 Years' War in 1618, Sweden watches from the sidelines, its gaze fixed firmly on the Baltic. Gustavus Adolphus, a devout Protestant, recognizes the ideological pull of the conflict but chooses patience over haste. Sweden's position is not yet secure, and the young king knows that engaging prematurely could jeopardize his kingdom's future. Instead, Gustavus focuses on internal reforms. The eastern Baltic territories of Ingria and Karelia, gained through the Treaty of Stolbovo, are fortified and integrated into the Swedish realm. These sparsely populated regions, though geographically strategic, present significant challenges. Their predominantly Orthodox Christian population resists Lutheran rule, forcing Swedish administrators to carefully balance religious consolidation with pragmatic governance. Under Gustavus Adolphus and his chancellor, Axel Oxenstierna, Sweden undergoes a transformation that touches every aspect of its society. Roads are constructed to facilitate trade and troop movements. Taxes are streamlined to ensure steady revenue, and local governance is centralized to bring the farthest corners of the realm under royal control. Religious tensions in Ingria and Karelia remain a challenge, as Lutheran authorities attempt to assert their influence over Orthodox communities. While some uprisings occur, Gustavus tempers his policies to avoid inflaming further rebellion. By 1621, Sweden is prepared to assert its power. The Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, weakened by internal strife and wars on multiple fronts, presents an opportunity. Gustavus sets his sights on Riga. The Siege of Riga is a demonstration of Sweden's military evolution. Gustavus personally leads his forces. Mobile artillery hammers Riga's defenses, while infantry advance in tightly coordinated lines. Cavalry, once a blunt instrument of brute force, now maneuvers with strategic precision, cutting through enemy lines. The city falls, its gates yielding to the might of the Swedish army. For Poland, the loss of Riga is a devastating blow, highlighting its waning influence in the Baltic. For Sweden, Riga is a symbol of its growing supremacy. The capture of Riga sets the stage for Sweden's broader ambitions in Livonia. Skirmishes with Polish forces intensify, foreshadowing the larger conflict that will erupt in 1626 as the Polish-Swedish War. Meanwhile, Denmark watches Sweden's growing power with growing unease. Christian IV, well aware of the implications of Sweden's success, begins preparing for the inevitable clash that looms on the horizon. At home, Gustavus continues to strengthen Sweden's foundations. Axel Oxenstierna ensures that the kingdom's administration can sustain its expanding ambitions, streamlining taxation and building infrastructure to support military campaigns. The navy grows stronger, its warships poised to challenge Denmark's control of the Baltic. By 1626, Sweden has been transformed from a vulnerable northern kingdom into a rising empire. The capture of Riga is both a testament to Gustavus Adolphus's vision and a harbinger of the kingdom's future ambitions. Yet the calm is fleeting. The 30 Years' War continues to rage, and Sweden's neutrality is nearing its end. Gustavus knows that Sweden cannot remain on the sidelines much longer. In the summer of 1626, Swedish warships cut across the Baltic Sea. Their sails stretch taut against the wind as they converge on the coast of Prussia. The target is clear: the Polish-controlled Duchy of Prussia, a keystone in the lucrative trade networks of the Baltic. Gustavus Adolphus, Sweden's warrior king, is at the helm of this campaign, his ambitions set on reshaping the balance of power in Northern Europe. This war is more than a struggle for territory. On one side stands Gustavus Adolphus, determined to secure Swedish dominance over Baltic trade and cement his kingdom's position as a rising power. On the other is Sigismund III of Vasa, the Catholic king of Poland-Lithuania, and Gustavus's deposed cousin, who still clings to his claim over the Swedish throne. The Polish-Swedish War is a showdown where dynastic feuds, religious rivalries, and the control of Europe's Golden Road intertwine. At the heart of the conflict lies a bitter personal and political rivalry. Sigismund III of Vasa, once king of Sweden, lost his crown in 1599 after Protestant nobles rejected his Catholic rule. From Warsaw, Sigismund never stopped plotting his return. For Gustavus Adolphus, Sigismund is not just a nuisance, but a symbol of the broader Catholic threat looming over Protestant Europe. 1626, Gustavus makes his move. Swedish forces land in Prussia, capturing key coastal towns like Pilau and Memel with swift and calculated precision. The first major engagement occurs at Nice, where Polish and Swedish forces collide. Poland's famed winged hussars charge the Swedish lines, but Gustavus's infantry stands firm, their disciplined formations and quick-reacting artillery blunting the hussars' power. Though the battle ends in a stalemate, it is clear that Gustavus's tactics are reshaping the rules of warfare. As the war escalates, the conflict spills onto the Baltic Sea. In 1627, the Polish fleet scores a rare victory at the Battle of Wallhof, surprising Swedish ships near Gdansk. For a brief moment, Poland regains control of the Baltic's waves, securing vital supply lines. But the victory is fleeting. On land, Gustavus's forces continue their methodical advance, tightening Sweden's grip on Prussia. The decisive land battle comes in 1628 at Dierzów, where Gustavus faces Poland's brilliant commander, Hetman Stanisław Konieczpolski. The battle is brutal as Poland's winged hussars charge again and again, only to be repelled by Gustavus's disciplined infantry and agile artillery. The Swedish forces hold their ground, showcasing the strength of Gustavus's reforms. Though the battle is inconclusive, Sweden retains its position, while Poland's losses mount. By 1629, the war has ground both sides down. Sweden's resources are stretched thin, with Gustavus eyeing the broader conflict of the 30 Years' War. Poland-Lithuania faces its own struggles: financial pressures, internal dissent, and the inability to break Sweden's hold on Prussia. Recognizing the futility of prolonged fighting, both sides agree to negotiate. In September 1629, the Truce of Altmark is signed. The Truce of Altmark reflects the realities of Sweden's growing dominance and Poland-Lithuania's faltering position. Under its terms, Sweden retains control over key Prussian ports, including Pilau, Elbing, and Memel, consolidating its grip on the Baltic trade. These ports, vital conduits for goods like grain and timber, grant Sweden control over approximately 3.5% of Polish customs revenues, an economic coup that secures a steady influx of funds for Gustavus Adolphus's military machine. Sweden emerges the clear winner, retaining its conquests in Prussia and securing the right to collect tolls from ships using Polish ports, a move that shifts the economic balance of the Baltic firmly in Sweden's favor. The Polish-Swedish War cements Sweden's place as a dominant Baltic power. The toll revenues and territorial gains from the war provide Sweden with the resources needed for its next move: intervention in the 30 Years' War.